they really went after. So all the folks that are in their skyboxes during the Super Bowl, that's no longer a corporate deduction. You can't deduct that at all. 162M is basically stating that it used to be, again, a good example of Congress passing legislation that sounds good but didn't do anything. Back in the 90s, we had a provision, 162M, that was basically, oh yes, we're going to pound corporations if they pay their CEOs more than $1 million. But we had a caveat there that we wouldn't put that on them if they had performance-based compensation. What a shock, this actually led to massive performance-based compensation with stock options that dramatically increased corporate CEO comp, so good job. This now, it did, it was a disaster in terms of what they're trying to do. This now says we're getting rid of the performance-based. We're just gonna, if you have benefits above $1 million for a CEO and the top 5 people I think of the company, we will tax you additionally at the corporate level. 1031 was eliminated all but for real estate, real property, land. So a lot of folks were getting into a lot of moonshine on tax-free exchanges beyond what Congress originally intended, and this is basically taking it back to its original intent. So you do have that in place. Nonprofits, charities, again, kind of going after higher salaried folks, salaries over $1 million, subject to 21% tax. Tax on college endowments. There was an article in the Wall Street Journal and that this morning that I was quoted in. They went after that for the very largest of endowments and put a bit of a scratch on them. College universities, I would say this for Reed and I are both from Nebraska. This is, of course, been actually 21% surcharge matters too because of our coach, but the 21 the surcharge, you can now get a charitable deduction. I don't know for the Broncos whether it's the same thing here, but if you want to get the fancy seats in Nebraska and Oklahoma and Alabama, you have to give a charitable deduction to the charitable donation to the university of several thousands of dollars, and then you can get a fancy seat. No longer, you just have to give because you give. And then some UBIT type earners. And then most importantly, as I mentioned, the craft beer being really the most critical piece of the entire bill out there. International, they moved to a territorial system, as I mentioned, and got rid of the old deferral. So that's why you're hearing about all these folks taking these runs. They had massive, like Apple, great example, had hundreds of billions of dollars overseas that was not taxable until they brought it back. Well, they were basically keeping the money over there. They were loaning it back and playing all sorts of moonshine games. And Congress finally said enough already. We're going to have a one-time tax of, I think it ended up being 14.95% or something like 15. It kept going up and up. It was a good example of scoring when I talked about earlier. It's like, well, why did they pick that number? I'm like, well, they picked that number because that's how much revenue they needed. So it started like at 10, and then it went only in one direction. It just kept going up. Like, well, where can we get more money? I know. So they got into that. So there's basically was a tax deemed on that, whether they brought it back or not. On it, and then so I guess it ended up at 15.5 and 8% there on it. So you went to that on the overseas activities, and then for the inbound, trying to do some base erosion to keep. What you're trying to do, as you can imagine, is keep folks with their intellectual properties, not to move them overseas. So trying to give them a lower rate for that as well too, and everything. So it's still kind of, I think, an area we're looking for a lot of regs and guidance on, but they're trying to keep it as an even playing field. I think it'll have some success in terms of keeping U.S. companies from going overseas to avoid the international worldwide taxation and what have you. We'll have to see how it all falls through, but that's kind of a rough and ready overview of where we are on the foreign. I just wanted to mention this. I'm going to ask Reed to just say one word, and then I'm going to just talk about, we're not done yet with taxes. You'll be pleased to know there's more taxes coming, so I'll give you a quick thumbnail on that. But some things for you all to pay attention to here in the area that we work with Harris, a company very closely, that are still viable provisions is one is the R&D tax credit. And I would just say to you that the one thing that R&D, the folks think about it is I understand this is about applied science, not just basic science. So you'd be astounded at the number of areas, including construction, but particularly agriculture, food production here in Idaho, big, but obviously software. It's been expanded now for startups. We recently had the AMT repealed, so it's good against AMT. it's a much more wider benefit than people really anticipate. And Idaho companies really need to look at it. But Reed, I don't know if you just want to say a quick word or two about how folks might want to think about R&D in Idaho.
Yeah, thank you. And here in Idaho too, as Brent pointed out, there's an incentive to try to keep companies in the state and be innovative and to embrace the changing technologies, be much more competitive, not only here in the United States, but abroad. So there is an R&D tax credit here in Idaho as well. The combination of the two can literally run your taxes almost to zero. For companies who are normally innovative, who have production taken 199 in the past, architects, engineers, as Dean pointed out, agriculture is big in this credit. This is really the kind of time to look at that as all the other changes go through this tax code. Some will benefit you, some may not. But Congress and Idaho particularly, wanted to make sure that some of these things stayed in place, one being the R&D tax credit, seen in a much broader use. So certainly, you know, talk to Harris Company, talk to us, Harris CPAs, excuse me, and we would love to talk to you about all these kind of wonderful things, but that's really been a major change that I think is going to be here and have a lot more benefit now, especially with the new tax laws.
Yeah, so architects, engineers, construction, you build anything, make anything, you're pretty much in the sweet spot to qualify. WOTC, work opportunity tax credit, is out there as well too. This is a hiring credit at the federal government level. That stayed in place, as well as IC disc, again, kind of these odd shorthand names, I apologize. But this is an export incentive really designed for small and medium businesses and actually very good for agriculture as well too. I know there's a massive amount of exporting of agricultural products here. All that you need to be looking at, so that stayed in place, so very real benefits that are out there beyond just the overall. 199 DPD is out though. The domestic production deduction was eliminated by Congress as part of paying for everything. So I just wanted to kind of put those in your mind that there's lots of opportunities out there for you to save taxes. Again, this just gives you kind of an overall feeling for the costs and dollars involved of certain provisions out there. And then on some of the individual side, just to give you a feel and flavor of what Congress was doing. I wanted to just spend 1 minute here and then go to questions on the tax bill. So work is never done. Right now we're debating in the Congress, obviously first whether they're going to keep the government open. I actually thought there was a good quip the other day that someone said, yesterday said, well, no one settles on Wednesday. And I think that's true. Yeah, we got till Friday. Why do something now that you could wait till Friday to do? I would say, just as an aside, if you wonder why Congress has so many recesses and breaks, it's because we would never get anything done without recesses or breaks. So when I was on the Senate floor, I managed the big tax bills for Senator Grassick, chairman of the chairman of the Finance Committee, I beg your pardon. And so we're on the floor, and it's Thursday, I don't know, about 2 o'clock. And of course, all the members are going to get to leave and go. And there was actually a big group of them all going for the Paris Air Show and what have you to think deep thoughts about Paris Air Show and what have you. And so down came Senator McCain to see where we were on the votes. And I said to him, well, we've got 40 yeas and nays set. So yeas and nays, the Senate at rocket speed basically moves at 4 votes an hour. So senators can do math very, very quickly when it's figuring out time, space, vote, and flight. And so they were like 40 votes, okay, we're going to be here for hours. And so he dropped a few choice words that now I guess are not appropriate to say anymore in describing foreign countries. But they were directed more at me, which was fine, I could take it. But I then said, oh, well, Senator, you should go see Senator Menendez because he's about to ask for the yeas and nays for his vote. If you could get a voice vote, that would at least stop it down. So off went McCain. I was here, and he was about where you were sitting, where's Menendez. Well, clearly the time in Hanoi had been well served because he just was like really going after Menendez. And Menendez was just like this. So he came back and said, okay, he's going to voice vote. Who else you got? So we worked out the entire afternoon, and McCain, bless his heart, got rid of almost all of my votes, and off we went because all the senators wanted to get the hell out of town. So it's very useful to have all that. So that's where we are, is on the CRs, trying to get that. So they're going to have a temporary CR because why do something permanent when you can do it temporary? And we're going to have a temporary CR to keep the government running for about 30 days. The expectation is that the next vote will have a tax bill on it, and probably important to a few of you here is it will have a number of the energy extenders, including 179 Cap D, will be in there. But solar, wind, all the energy provisions. Senator Hatch, now chairman of the Finance Committee, put a bill out there In part, this is to get the Democrats engaged and interested in it. It's a little bit of an overstatement, as kind of many of these things are. A lot of Republicans care about some of these energy provisions as well, too. But it's trying to put together a coalition of happiness in terms of the bill and to get people going along with where they are and what have you. So I think if it doesn't go on the energy extenders bill, and the other provisions that'll be, there's some cats and dogs that were dropped out of the reconciliation bill, the big tax reform bill, because they didn't conform with the rules of reconciliation, are in there. So you'll have mostly energy. They're also looking at medical device tax being delayed and the Cadillac tax on the affordable character on your health deductions also being delayed. So kind of a grab bag of happiness that they're trying to put into the tax bill. If they don't put on the energy, on the CR that's going to be in the middle of February, they'll probably almost certainly put it then on the debt ceiling bill, which will be in March. The debt ceiling bill will probably be the last major bill that gets out of town, and that's why they're focused on it, because then they're already beginning to feel the run-up for elections. So that's just to make you aware, because I know energy matters a lot to folks here. That is expected out there. IRS reform is kind of more inside baseball, but for your accountants, it'll matter. This is like appeals, debt collection, offers and compromise, all the bells and whistles of IRS. That will move as a bill. I think they'll try to move it separately. I think you'll actually see funding for the IRS so they can actually answer their phones and what have you also going forward. So that's kind of what's left on the agenda for them for this year. Let me, two other things to come to mind. One on the R&D, just to go back to that, you were kind enough to mention to me, the previous speaker, about the enormous number of startups. I forgot to mention, the R&D credit was also recently expanded to allow startups to take advantage of it for the first time. Those who don't have an income tax liability can take it against their payroll tax. So you want to think about it for that as well, too. And then lastly, the Quill decision from years and years ago that dealt with basically the ability of states to tax companies that are not have a physical location in their state. The Supreme Court announced that it was going to review a case that essentially raises the Quill decision. The expectation is that the court may provide greater, given the new internet world. Quill was a decision from way back. I mean, it's a 25, 30-year-old decision. Is that given our modern economy of internet and all those things, that the Supreme Court may, in part because Congress hasn't done anything on it, and in their decision they had earlier said, well, Congress could always fix this. What a shock Congress didn't fix it. The Supreme Court may look at it and say, well, we think that you have a presence that can be taxed. Anyways, we'll see where they end up, but the kind of the early betting is that there's a reason they picked it up and it's to revisit it. So obviously that won't kind of come around the mountain for a while in terms of a decision, but that is out there. And it may prompt Congress to do something on it. So that's kind of rough and ready where we are. So as the previous speaker said, you're certainly in interesting times when it comes to tax. But I think, like I said, it's certainly a lot of, wear a pink dress, have a bow in your hair, and hop on one foot, and you get your tax breaks. It's not clean, but it is overall, good news for businesses in particular, for individuals. But it is, I'll try again how I started. It's good, Harris is here with you all because it's going to take some hard, reading and focus on what's out there. Like I said, I hope today gave you at least a sense and a feeling of what's out there in terms of possibilities. But it is a genuine benefit that you've got out there, but you are going to need to work hard to get it. So I'll take any questions, otherwise let you get on with your joyous day. Thank you very much.
We have any questions?
I've stunned you all into silence. My God. All right, well.
Great. Sounds good. Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks. Thank you for coming this morning. We really appreciate being able to offer this service for you guys. Don't forget, we have our Center of Influence coming online in the next month, and look forward to seeing all of you down there, whether it's for an open house or just to kind of see the space. If you need CPE, don't forget there's a sign-up sheet outside, and turn in the evaluations that are on the table for that to get credited to you. The presentation this morning has been recorded, so we'll send that out. If you would like to get a copy of that, just let Tara in our office know. And also, don't forget about the handouts that Brent left outside. And thank you all for coming this morning. We'll see you soon.